So just I wanted to go over a quick agenda for what we'll be covering today. We'll start with the who, what, when, where, why, and how of electronic bidding. We're going to give some perspective from Ohio DOT, some perspective as well from the locals, Bid Express perspective, a legal perspective of electronic bidding. Then we'll jump into an optional workshop, which will start right about 12 o'clock. So if you've got any questions, if you want to hang on the line, right, in about 2 hours, we will, continue to address any questions. We're not going anywhere. So we've got this room for most of the day. If anybody has questions, comments, things that they would like to share, or, that they don't want to ask directly during the presentation, that's totally fine. We'll be here. We've got a number of people on staff ready to help with any of those questions. I'm really excited to be here today. My name is Gavin Diaz. I'll kind of serve as your moderator. And in the room here with us at ODOT, we've got a very esteemed panel of presenters that I'm excited to introduce. They'll be kind of taking this seat here, so you'll get to see everybody as they come in and taking their presentation. But I'm just going to give you an overview of who you'll be seeing today so that you know who they are before you see them. And most of these names, if you are a local in Ohio, you'll know these people already. So start off with Jeff Payton. Jeff is the ODOT local projects manager. Jeff will start us off, kick off right after me. And then next up will be Tina Collins. Tina is in IT from ODOT, and she handles the contract lighting services. She'll be giving us, kind of a central office kind of update. Next up, we have Tom Pinette. Tom is from Keegler, Brown, Hill, and Ritter, and former ODOT counsel as well. Mary Ellen Kimberlin is in the room with us as well. She is a consultant, as well as a former ODOT some time ago. Stephanie Goff will be joining virtually or remotely. She is the Greene County engineer. I already introduced myself, and then we have Joey Meyer as well. And Joey will be giving, Joey's assistant director from Infotech, will be giving some of the Infotech Bid Express perspective. And we also have Rusty Sherman with us here as well in the room. Rusty works with Tom, and will be giving us some of that legal perspective also. All right, with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and get up out of my seat here and hand things over to Jeff.
Good morning, everyone. I want to thank you for taking the time this morning to participate in with our online bidding workshop. Before I hand it over to Tina and some of the other folks in the room that can talk more of the technicalities of the online bidding, I just want to give a brief background on what brought us to where we are today. Back in January of 2020, we had roughly about 4 LPAs that were using the online bidding. And there was an initiative proposed by the Office of Construction, Division of Construction here at ODOT, that we do a pilot program to introduce more LPAs to online bidding. At the time, ODOT had been doing online bidding for roughly about 15 to 16 years. And we saw great benefits with the online bidding. And when we wanted to pass some of that on to our locals, we saw that there was a lot of potential for some process improvements if going with the online bidding. So, as I said, in January, the pilot was proposed. And when we did our first rollout training, we had roughly 32 LPAs that had participated in the pilot program. It was many more LPAs than I had intended or I had expected to participate in the pilot. And we were very happy that there were that many locals that were interested in using the online bidding platform with Infotech. So we initiated the pilot. We did our first training in March of 2020. And I believe it was the day before we all left the facility here for due to the COVID and started working remotely. So we were able to squeak that in-person training in at the last minute. And like I said, we had about 32 participants, and as things progressed and people saw the benefit of doing the online bidding with COVID, we ended up with roughly, to this point, I believe we have 57 or 58 LPAs that are participating with the online bidding. Word of mouth, it's been a great program. There's the word of mouth that's really taken off, and there's a lot of LPAs that really see the benefits of the online bidding. So I encourage you to, as we go through this and the presenters present their material, I encourage you to ask questions. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Tina Collins, and she's going to start things off with ODOT perspective on the online bidding. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. As a lot of you have probably heard on many different occasions or multiple different occasions, I think Jeff even mentioned, ODOT's been doing some type of electronic bidding for around close to 20 years. Before we did online bidding, we did electronic bidding with the same software. At the time was called Expedite. I think, in my opinion, it's been successful because we focused on bidding, just strictly on bidding, not on the subordinate processes that sometimes get flopped onto top of the bidding process. For me, the most intimidating part of switching from paper to online was ensuring that we had created the most stripped down, straightforward, simplified bidding process for the contractors. With most processes, there are typically things that can be streamlined with anything, usually even in life. Processes over time tend to add layers. We're like, oh, we need this information, so we'll get this form when we get their bid. It's kind of human nature just to throw in, extra pieces of information when you already have an established process to do something. But those can quickly get out of hand. And I think that's what I found when I was evaluating the online bidding part. At the time when we were doing this, there were only a handful of states doing online bidding. So the concept was still fairly new. Luckily for you guys and for everyone, it's kind of commonplace, and it's the best practice now for organizations to do some type of online bidding or electronically, online usually. And it's beneficial for all the parties involved. For ODOT, for us, we immediately realized time savings from processing of bids because we had to enter them, verify them, proofread what was entered. It also in turn gave us the ability to immediately post the apparent low bidder information in lieu of reading the bids publicly. Contractors, they have advantages as well. They can do their price updates right up to the last minute. I can't tell you how many times I've been on the phone with a contractor. Our bid opening is at 10, and at 9:58, help them submit their bid. And that, it feels really good to be able to do that. But that's a multi-layered benefit because they get last minute price cuts. They incorporate those in their bid. So it's a win for everyone. The department saves, the taxpayers save, everyone. I know for us with paper bids, we had to reject not a lot, but a fair amount of bids due to mathematical errors. That's one thing you realize immediately with online bidding. Mathematical errors are just a thing of the past. And for us, virtually eliminated bid rejections because of mathematical errors. One thing I think that's important that I'd like to touch on is standardization, and I'll go into this in a little bit more detail later. But creating repeatable processes is beneficial for everyone across, all aspects of business. And it makes it, like for the contractors, easy for them to use. They have the same familiar process no matter who they're bidding with. So it decreases the amount of time it takes for the contractors to get up to speed. And it also makes it so they can bid quickly pretty much from anywhere. I mean, we have contractors that bid, you know, on vacation, wherever. So I think that's one of the key things. And we're going to touch on that like repeatedly with the standard templates that we created and everything. So I'll touch on this in a little bit more detail on a later slide, but just keep in mind that there are many agencies and people who have already gone down the online bidding path and realized immediate benefits. Stephanie, right? Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Stephanie now.
Okay, Gavin, if you can go ahead and promote the slides for me, or Joey.
No problem. Gotcha.
And I'm actually going to skip a couple slides too, so
No worries.
because Tina's already touched on a few things, so. Okay. Do you have the slides I sent you, Joey?
Yep. Yep.
Okay, there we go. So I'm going to skip over a couple of these because a lot of these she's already talked about. But as far as she already talked a lot about the government impact as far as streamlining, those type of things. There is cost savings. We have seen it from both agencies that I have worked at as far as contractors being able to work from remote work from wherever, whether it's in the field, wherever, without having to drive and deliver their bids. So we know from there, they can really get those good prices all the way up. And yes, they play with them literally all the way up to the very last second. If you want to go ahead and go to the next slide. As far as advantages for government agencies, I'm just going to cover a few. As far as opening the bids, some commissioners do this. Some commissioners will be the ones opening the bids. Some counties will have their finance director open the bids. Just kind of depends county by county how they choose to do that. But some of the advantages are, again, they're paperless. You don't have as much advertising costs. And that's one thing. You can shorten what you advertise since you do pay by the inch in the paper. You don't have to have your full write-up anymore like you did before. You can actually reference over to your link for your website. So then you don't have to pay for as many inches, and then they can read the job description there. And you can talk with your law director as far as what they're comfortable with, but the way it is written in the Ohio Revised Code, you can do it that way. For cities, you'll need to look at how your government is set up. But you can do that. Like the nice thing is again, these can be, you don't have to deliver them in person. A lot of times contractors will send co-ops, or they'll be sitting outside the commissioner's office wanting to drop these off. No longer have to do that. They don't have to worry about handwriting in a bid last minute and having math errors. So you don't have those issues. You don't have to produce the extra copies. We've all been through that. You're guessing how many copies you need to print of the bid books and how many copies you need to prevent of the plans in the past when you're doing hard copies, and then you end up with a bunch of extras or shortage or those type of things. The nice thing is you can upload everything up on Bid Express. Your plans, any EPA permits, any documents, whatever you need can all go up on there, no cost. It's no cost to you using the system, so you can put whatever you need to put up there. Notes, anything like that. We used this for years at Montgomery County. So when I came to Greene County, it was a no-brainer to implement this. Some nice things also are, your results are reliable because it is error checking them. So they can't accidentally do math errors or not fill in something without them knowing. I mean, it's going to tell them multiple times you have an incomplete bid. They are sealed, so we cannot see the results until we actually open the bids. They can play with them as many times as they want, but again, we do not see them. It's secure with an ID, those type of things. As soon as we open the bids, we can post the results right online, so you don't have to have those phone calls of, hey, what's the bid results? Who was the apparent low bidder? Those type of things. You can immediately post the bid results. You can post who the apparent bid is when you're ready to, and you can even post your bid tabs, which is a common question we always get from contractors. Can I get a copy of the bid tabs so they can see where they lost the job? You can upload that right into there and have those posted for them to be able to see. And again, this eliminates bid errors and incomplete bids. As far as additional questions and answers, the nice thing is the contractors can post their questions. Everybody sees the questions. Contractors may or may not like this, But the good thing is everybody sees the question, everybody sees the answer. So you're making it a level playing field. It gives you more time to play with up to that bid window of the 72 hours also. So you don't have to do a lot of delaying of bids. So questions and answers can be answered out there. If you do need to do an addendum, you can do the addendum right in Bid Express, and it's pushed out via email. So you don't have to do the old fashioned way of faxes or those type of things, knowing whether or not they got the addendums or needing to delay the bid openings, those type of things. Notifications, they're automatically notified anytime there isn't a question and answer that goes out there, and also addendums. And again, I talked about the bid tab summaries. They're automatically generated. So you don't have to do the old fashioned when you saw usually in commissioners' offices or elsewhere, where everybody would be writing them down and going and making a copy for everybody. Like I said, again, that can just be posted right online. This can also, if you're using LPA, which is basically the construction management side of the system, you can import the output of your successful bidder right into LPA and keep running with your construction management software. So you're not rekeying in anything. You don't have any errors from that standpoint. Again, no cost to the agency. It's completely free for you. The contractors pay either they can do a monthly fee or they can do a per bid fee as far as the cost to the contractors. As previously mentioned, obviously we know the whole COVID had an effect on everybody. It was interesting. I came to Greene County and was already looking at deploying Bid Express because they were doing it the old fashioned way here. We actually deployed Bid Express right before COVID hit. I was in Australia when COVID hit. We are actually already had our advertisement already on March 9th in Bid Express. So when COVID hit and the world was shutting down, we did not have to change. We were actually able to just hold that bid date of March 26th that we already had set for I think 4 bids. So the timing was perfect for us as the world was shutting down because contractors were still running. We still needed to keep running with our bid or with our paving and chip seal and all those type of programs. And I was actually required to be quarantined because I just came from international. So we were able to open the bids remotely. So the timing was perfect for us. We were already going to do it anyway, and it just happened to fall. So we didn't have to even miss a beat when it came to doing that. As Tina mentioned, and she'll get into this in a little more detail, but they have, when we started it in Montgomery County and we started at Greene County, there was not standardized templates. A lot of times I actually used, we have Montgomery County and brought it over to Greene County when we rolled ours out. But since then, ODOT's been working with Bid Express to actually create standardized templates. So the nice thing is you can have standardized templates that you can duplicate across any of your projects, whether it's a state project, whether it's a federal project or an OPWC project. Those templates are standard, so your contractors are used to using them. They know exactly what you're looking for in the information, and you're not recreating. So you can implement these very quickly. You're literally filling in a few things, uploading your plans, your quantities, and you're ready to roll. Again, it's making sure when they submit bids that you have all the required forms. So whether it's workers' comp or insurance, or whether or not they owe back taxes, all those type of things, those forms are all built in. So you're making sure you're getting all those requirements you need from a legal standpoint. So like I said, you can roll this out very quickly and it's consistent from bid to bid. They are drag and drop basically. So if you need to grab something in particular, you can drag it over into the template that you need for whatever you're ready to hit the bid. In general, you can usually roll out a bid from the time you build it to ready to roll in less than an hour. Your biggest time is putting together your quantities. You're already having to do that before anyway. You can have it in an Excel spreadsheet or coming out of Estimator, either one, and implement it right into Bid Express to be able to have your bids. And another thing is the nice thing as far as multiple funding for projects. So you can again know where you are with those as far as your templates from that standpoint. So, okay, we'll go ahead and turn it over to the next speaker.
Thank you, Stephanie. Joey Meyer here from Infotech. I thought we would go through some other perspectives since we weren't able to have our representatives from OCA to join us. And we also have some context and feedback from other local public agencies that we would like to take you through in terms of the impacts, how contractors were reacting, and what sort of considerations would we continue to keep in mind as we think about this in our own context and bidding process. So we engaged with OCA in terms of their background with, obviously, since ODOT has been using an online bidding process for many, many years. They wanted to get some feedback and hear from their bidders' perspective on how is this helping? Is this helping? What's happening since you have responded from the paper world versus the online bidding world? Because we still have many agencies who are taking hard copy bids, receiving mailed bids, and hand or hire delivery to come on site. So they provided us with some background. I thought I'd read off. Online bidding has been extremely popular with OCA members since ODOT went to it in 2006. It is much more efficient from both the contractors and owners' perspective. Software ensures that bid omissions, and we're echoing what Stephanie and Tina has already mentioned about what they're experiencing as well. Bid omissions are addressed before submission, and arithmetic errors are a thing of the past. So I promise that quote wasn't coordinated to begin with. The errors are a thing of the past is a common thread that we're seeing among other agencies. Pays for itself by having just one contractor's low bid accepted instead of rejected on a technicality. In addition, by not having to submit a bid in person, more bids will be turned in on any given project, leading to more competition and lower prices. And that's another factor when taking into account the pool, the bidding audience that each local public agency might have. Being able to broadly spread this across the state and even nationally, in turn, promotes more access, and a lot of agencies are seeing an increased amount of submissions for these types of projects, where one or two might have come in, you might see 70% more because of the ability for contractors to access and submit from the convenience of their home office, out and about, or wherever there is Wi-Fi access. So continuing on from another perspective here, we engaged with a construction company. I'm not going to butcher this name, but we can all see this on the screen here. I'll read this off just so we can hear from them, as if, let's just imagine they were here presenting as well. The first issue was up to the minute sub and supplier pricing. Many times the prices change right up to a few minutes before the bids are due. The change could come in any form: a phone call from a salesperson, a fax with revised quote, or an email. Depending on the location of the owner where paper bids would be opened, there might be several hours drive. Some locations might require parking in a short distance and walking. The prices could change during this time, and the bidder may not be aware until he or she return to the office. With online bidding, the price changes can be incorporated into bid minutes prior to the opening. So just hearing from their point of view, and not only from the agency's point of view, this is a common activity that we've seen over the years since the start. Contractors in the paper world were getting those last minute price cuts, wanting to incorporate it into their bid. And many times it's frantically at the bid opening, where it could be messing up the bid, a mistake, or missing something, or determining which envelope to turn in, while ensuring that contractors have access to an online process like online bidding. They're able to incorporate those last minute price cuts literally up to the last second of the bid opening. So a couple more before we jump into the next topic and the next perspective. City of Fairborn, they were happy to share some of their thoughts and perspective as well. Thought I'd read this. It has made opening bids very easy and saves us a lot of time in taking paper bids and putting them into Excel format, just like Stephanie had mentioned about the Excel format process, so we can prepare the bid tab and do the comparison of bids. We have used software for all of our ODOT projects, and we've used it for our local projects as well. And we're looking at having other departments that bid out work to use the software. So I know there's a common question of, hey, I know this has been used for ODOT, but can this process be used for other types of solicitations that it's just self-funded, it's local funding only, goods and services? And we have many examples of many agencies who are ensuring that their contractor, consultants, and vendor base will have access to submit bids, not only on ODOT projects, but on their own local projects. So here's a good example of that happening at the City of Fairborn. Newark and Fair Lawn, This is a huge time and energy saver from printing, binding, and distributing. So that's something that Stephanie mentioned. So we're seeing a lot of this echoed across the industry. Large packages of paper. So going online for bidding added another level of efficiency and management by allowing us to better track plan holders and submit addendum. So addendum is another process where there's when an agency has to manually compile this information, being able to put together an email list, having to email that information out, confirm that all these contractors have received all the required addenda. That process can get pretty hairy, and many contractors can miss this information pretty quickly. So a lot of the goal and impetus of online bidding, aside from air checking, aside from ensuring that these contractors can get their bid in on time and make those price cuts, is also during the advertisement that the information that changes during a solicitation will be effectively shared across all those bidders. Automatic email notifications are going out so that information is not being submitted with out-of-date responses, and which again could potentially lead to a missed a low bid that's missing an acknowledgement and an addenda, a low bid that's missing a signature or a form or a field, which ultimately means the agency has to mark them as non-responsive and move to the next responsive bidder. So we're trying to ensure that these agencies are not having to toss out a bid that could be potentially low, which many times we've heard that low is thousands of dollars in difference, or we've had occasions where it's been millions of dollars in difference. So just having that one chance, we want to remove that risk out of the picture, and that kind of feedback we're hearing across our Ohio database. So Fairlawn, the review of bids also has been a pleasant surprise. Before Bid Express, the review took days. Now the review takes minutes. That has to do with looking at bids, ensuring that all the forms are included, whereas on the electronic process, that's pre-vetted. It ensures that everybody's completed what's being asked of them. The bid tabulations are not having to be manually compiled from a stack of papers into a spreadsheet, which depending on the number of line items could take hours, days, and reviewing them for accuracy. So the goal is also to reduce the amount of time it takes to get to the point of award. Okay, so now that we talked about the LPA perspective, we've talked about ODOT perspective, I want to get into the actual online bidding perspective and share some background information so you know this is not a new process, to hopefully help you and your agency feel a little bit more comfortable about what's involved. And I'd like to get into what do these federal templates look like? What do the state templates look like? What does it look like to advertise a solicitation? What does it look like for a contractor to respond to that solicitation? So I'll actually be taking you through a walkthrough. But just the first thing real quick to mention background, we already know that this was started in 2006 with ODOT. Our database of active Ohio LPAs is over 50 local cities and counties, special districts that have been actively issuing bids in a manner where they're allowing contractors to receive responses. In 2020, we've, through the system, received over 1,000 bids worth 1.8 billion. So this is definitely not something new. It's not an experiment, tried and true. And we want all the agencies to feel comfortable that this is a process that's been through the ringer, and we already have over 50 agencies on it. So let's get into what this entails. Many of you have questions. We've gone over some of the background information. What are some important things to know? So I want to get into the nitty-gritty, the details. What does it look like to draft and advertise? What does it look like to a contractor or consultant, a vendor, when accessing and responding to solicitations? And what does it look like when opening bids? How does that affect your bid openings? So I'm going to jump off here for a second, switch screens so that you all can be following along on my screen. All right, so you should be seeing, and let me make sure this group can see it. We have attendees here on site, so I want to make sure that those attendees can see what I'm saying as well. bear with me a moment here. Okay. We are golden. All right, so let's start off with asking the question, how are contractors, vendors, consultants aware of an opportunity to respond electronically? So let's go into what a normal procedure for a local public agency who decides to use an online bidding process. How do they make this known to their contractors? So the first thing I want to point out as I log in, and we're on our demo website. Everything that we're viewing right now is accessible through any browser. Doesn't require any installation or IT involvement to get this in operation. So I'd like to mention that BidExpress is a multi-tenant online bidding tool, meaning we have hundreds of agencies across the nation that are accepting bids electronically from their contractor, consultant, and vendor community. But each agency that is on BidExpress will have their own dedicated landing page, and that can be found in the My Profile. So what I'm actually logged in as the agency's perspective, where the agency can manage their own account information and what gets displayed to the contractor community. And you know what? Forgive me, I logged in as a contractor when I should be logged in as an agency. Bear with me again here. Okay, so going back to agency has their own public facing homepage that they can manage, and getting to the answer to the question of how do vendors know that there's an opportunity to respond electronically? What we have seen from our user base is they'll take this public facing landing page, which can be branded according to some of the seals and banners that they might upload. I just have City of Ohio on here. This would be used to post on your own agency landing page and your own agency website, where you can direct your contractors and consultants to access electronic bids. So this link, what we see happen, it gets posted on the agency's website. Contractors come to the agency's website. They're looking at the information on how to submit bids. Where do they need to go to respond to the solicitations? They'll go to this website, and they'll be directed to create a free account and access the electronic solicitation information. The other procedure we see agencies take is updating their bid specs, updating their notice to contractors, where there might be a section on how to submit bids or where to submit bids, either in addition to a drop-off location or instead of a drop-off location. There would be a link to bidexpress.com or a link directly to your own public-facing landing page within the bidexpress.com platform. So the main goal is making those contractors aware, and it's just pointing them to a website, whether it's putting it on your website or updating your bid specs. Their goal is to get access to the platform so they can access bid documents and or submit responses electronically. So that was answering the first question. Now let's go over the question of what does it take to draft and advertise a solicitation electronically or online. So now that you've, let's say, put a link on your own agency website or updated your bid specs, what are the steps involved with posting information so that contractors have the ability to respond electronically? So I'm actually on our tab called Our Solicitations, which is a view that enables agencies to manage all of their active, inactive, closed, drafted solicitations. This view is only available to the agency. Again, I'm logged in as an agency perspective. And the main point to get across when it comes to advertising is the fact that when you're doing online bidding, you're working off a configurable or customized template. So when Tina mentioned that we have standardized templates that we're working from. So if you're working on a federal project, or you're ready to release a federal project, a FEMA project, a DOT only funded project, or a local project, you would have in your own library of templates, which is where I'm navigating to now. Each agency would have their own library of templates. And when I say template, this is acting as a representation of the solicitation where contractors would need to access bid documents and fill out forms that are due before the deadline. So for example, I'm going to look at this federal template, and this will contain a section for just the general information. This is a draft solicitation. This is a template. This is not something live. So each solicitation will contain basic information. You have on this attachment list the federal bid doc template, ODOT, LPA, DBE utilization form, revised by America background. This is already uploaded, and this is available for contractors to download for free. And it's something I'll get into when it comes to unlimited space and the ability to upload plans and specs and any type of bid documentation you want to. But the goal with templates is to communicate that you have a set of required forms, whereas before it's printed off. You have either Word documents or PDFs that are printed off by the contractor consultant community. They would be filled out in wet ink, hand delivered or hire delivered to a drop-off location. Instead of those procedures, the goal with templates is to allow those individuals to submit responses in an online format, in a digital format, where they're using their keyboard, web browser, and signing with an electronic or digital signature. So a major difference here. So they're using their web browser to fill out their response instead of printing something out and filling out something with wet ink. Now, this is an example of what this federal template would look like. You have, I'm sure many of you might recognize some of the required fields. It's collecting the same bidder information you would expect. I've got some example ODOT item specs in here that we'll use for this project, drainage, payment. Obviously, this would be different every solicitation, but I just threw something in here so that we'd have an example. Bid bond information, certification of compliance with section 3517, the Ohio Revised Code, federally required EEO certification form, Buy America certification, certification against debarment, so on and so forth, non-collusion affidavit, declaration of property tax and delinquency. So again, going back to the main point of templates is, one, to standardize the requirements so that the agency is adopting what is being asked of them on these types of solicitations, but also on the contractor side, they're filling out all these required fields, and you'll see this from their perspective in a moment, so that we're ensuring they're not missing any of these requirements to the field level, not only forms, but to the field level. You'll see these red asterisks next to some of these required action items within the forms. The goal is to ensure that these bidders are not only filling out a consistent format, but ensuring that the response doesn't have any silly errors or minor technicalities that would cause them to be deemed non-responsive. So there's going to be intelligence embedded in these templates to ensure nothing is being missed on their side, and they're confident they're submitting a complete responsive bid. Not only that, but on the collection of bid items, there's math calculations involved for the unit price, where it's quantity times unit price gets your extension. You have section totals, your grand totals. If you're doing facility bids, you have your base bid and alternates. We're ensuring that this is doing the math for the contractor, and again, not being thrown out because of a silly math error. The last thing to mention is on the template side with these bid items is this is how the agency would be collecting the bid tabulations at an immediate instant level during the bid opening. So after the deadline, agencies open bids in their normal conference room, or maybe they don't have to open them in a conference room. They can be at their home office or their office. They open those bids. The goal of having this process digital, in addition to the others that were mentioned, is so that these bid tabs are immediately available in electronic format, being compared to all the other responses that came in, so that the analysis can begin, the award can begin, and again, no need for a transfer from the paper submission to a spreadsheet. So hopefully that came across well, clear as mud. This is the goal of templates. Everything in BidXpress is based on having a template. If you have your own Local projects, you can build that template in there so it incorporates those requirements at a digital level, and the same thing with federal and state templates. So with that said, let's talk about what are the steps involved in getting this advertised. I asked that question earlier. The first step is to select a template from your own library of templates. Now I have my own template library with various agencies I've worked with in the past, but this would be your own. It could be a couple, it could be dozens. There's no limit here. We're going to select this federal template so that we can use this as our guinea pig. That was our step one. It's going to take us into a screen called status draft. You can have many users involved. If you have an engineering firm that you're working with that is required to upload plans and specs, you can invite them with limited access to be able to upload that information. You can collaborate internally to build and draft this solicitation. Now, step one was to select a template. Step two is to fill out this general info tab, which is going to contain your basic information. Description, what we see normally agencies do is maybe they have their own bid package in PDF or in Word up on another screen. They copy and paste the bid number and they copy and paste the description and select the deadline, which will put it out. We'll be crazy and say it's going to be due the next day. And that's it. You do have the option to auto advertise, which enables the agency to, instead of having to come in the day of that this is going to be pushed out for advertisement, have the system to automatically advertise it in line with maybe a newspaper advertisement, or they know that they're not going to be in the office or know they're going to be out and about and they don't want to have to remember to come in and hit publish. So we're going to go ahead and save that. That was step two, is just provide the general info for this solicitation. Step three is to upload any bid package information. This attachment list, it could be renamed to plans and specs. It could be renamed to bid documents, whatever you're used to, but this will contain all the required documents for the federal. If it's for a local project, you can upload your bid specs, your notes to the contractors, your plans. There's no limit to the file size. There's no limit to the file type. You can have videos in here, and we have plenty of agencies will post videos in here. And this will track who has downloaded the documents for the agency. So if you're curious in terms of who's interested, who has the plans, the system will give you a list so you can gauge whether there's enough participation, tell you whether you need to schedule it out, push an addendum to extend it. But you're going to have the level of engagement to determine the interest level, as well as those who are intending to submit. So you have those two reports, a report to show interest and a report to show who's intending to respond. And that's going to come into play with this section here. Now, anybody who has downloaded the documents and anybody who's placed themselves on a plan holders list will become part of the email notices that go out. So if there's an addenda, if there's an alert, if there's a bid announcement or an award announcement, anybody on the plan holders list will receive that notification automatically. So there's no need to compile that for the agency. So that was step three. Step four, since we already have the template information in here, there's no need to make any adjustments there. Step four has to do with uploading your bid specs, your bid schedule, your item list, your unit prices. This can be imported directly from Excel. So if you can see here, I've already got items in here. This would be blank in a normal template, in a normal scenario. For the LPA to come in to take a spreadsheet, all they're going to need to do is go into more and click on this import. And it's going to ask the LPA to find that Excel sheet, and the output will be that spreadsheet gets consumed and absorbed into BidExpress so that it'll display the item information directly to contractors. Now, again, the goal here, instead of just uploading a spreadsheet or uploading a PDF, is you want the intelligence behind the scenes. You want to ensure that the math calculations are happening. You want to ensure that it's going to be collected for that instant bid tabulation report that is provided after the bid opening. And these are the sections that do that. So the goal is to import that Excel sheet directly into BidExpress, and we can configure it to where it's molded into how you operate with your spreadsheet. So on your local projects, you might see different columns here. You might have additional columns. The names might be different on these columns. This is configurable. So don't worry about if you see a section name or a missing section that you would normally need to put on your own projects. This is configurable. And I'll go into that in a minute here on the configurability and customization that you have available at your fingertips to make those local changes that you need to. So fourth step is to import your item list and you're ready to go. So just to recap, step 1 is to select your template. Step 2 is to fill out this general info tab. Step 3 is to upload this bid package information. Step 4 is to import the item list from Excel into BidExpress. So one other thing I'd like to point out before we get into the contractor's perspective is the fact that each section in here, you're just listening to me say that you can do this and that, and I haven't really shown you some of the background information. Each one of these sections is editable. So you can go in here and to edit, add, upload any attachments, rearrange. Let's say you wanted to tweak in your own templates, add a field, add a checkbox. This is drag and drop technology. Add groups, add links, add number fields, add selection lists. So it may seem overwhelming at first. This is the standardization that Tina and Stephanie talked about that you don't have to initially worry about, since we've done the legwork of building these approved templates at the state level. But in terms of the local level, if you want your own templates, we can work with you. Our team can work with you to establish your own templates. We can teach you how to build them on your own. So it just depends on your own arrangement and comfort levels on how you would like to handle that. But that's just the answer to the question on, hey, we've got our own projects that we don't necessarily need to use the state or federal or FEMA type approved templates. We want to do this on our own. We could do that with you, whether it's training you to use the drag and drop or building them for you. All right. So I'm going to get back out to the main screen and talk about the contractor perspective. So let's go ahead and advertise this. It's going to give me an entered advertisement notes. We're going to go over some of the questions here shortly, and don't worry, we're not ignoring anybody who's entering questions in the chat. I'm going to go ahead and advertise this. An email notice will go out to any of the contractors, consultants, or vendors that have opted in to receive email notices for your agency. So now I'm going to log out and log back in from the agency, the vendor perspective. So you can get an idea of what it is their experience might be, what's involved with them accessing and responding to a solicitation. So on my vendor view, I have similar tabs as the agency. My profile will allow me to manage my notifications, allows me to manage the user base. You can have users collaborate internally on a solicitation, even on different computers. You have access to our customer support team. As a contractor and as an agency as well, our customer support team is in our headquarters office in Gainesville, Florida. We're staffed at about 10 or 12, supporting just BidExpress, available from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. Monday through Friday Eastern, phone, email, and chat. And basically the process for a contractor, vendor, consultant in participating in an online solicitation is they create a free account, which entails entering an email, putting their company address, and confirming an email activation link. And the reason why we have them confirm an activation link is so that you as an agency know when you send an addendum notice or an alert or a warrant announcement that it's being sent out to the contractor, a real email, not a fake email. Once they create their free account, that contractor has a couple of ways of becoming aware of that solicitation that we talked about on the agency posting a link on the agency's website. We talked about the agency updating that link on their bid specs. We talked about the contractors opting into receiving email notices, or they can come in and do a search. This search tab uses key terms, searching the agency name, if they know the number, if they want to type in a item description. They can use this tab here. Search for it or click a direct link that's available within the email notice that goes out. So if they don't want to have to come in and know this project and search for it, there's an email notice that goes out. They can click the direct link and be able to immediately find it. So I'm going to click on this solicitation that we just advertised, which is the federal project we're working on. This screen will allow me to download anything available on this attachment list for free. review the requirements, review what kind of items on here, even before they decide to add themselves to the plan holders list or begin drafting a solicitation. If the agency has enabled a question and answer section or module within the platform, the contractor will have the ability to ask questions, and the agency will only see those notices that come in. So it's not immediately publicly available. The agency has full control over when the answers to the questions will be released and if. So the agency can draft answers and then establish a deadline so that after this time, no questions can be asked, and that database of answers that the agency creates or maybe invites the engineering consultant to answer them, those answers from the agency will be publicly available to not only those who ask, but anybody who wants to see those questions and the answers that are associated with them. Now, for the contractor who wants to respond, this select for bidding option will take them into the official draft window of the solicitation. They'll be immediately be confronted with this estimated time remaining based on the atomic naval clock. According to that individual's time zone, you might see bidders outside the state responding, and they'll be able to see the respondents from their own time zone. This estimated time remaining will go down to the last second. It'll start that countdown, even though it's in minutes right now. As it gets closer, it'll go down to seconds. You'll notice that this submit bid, where my mouse is hovering over, that green button is available. However, once that last second passes, the contractor, consultant, vendor will no longer have the capability of submitting a response. So this process is to mimic the sealed bidding requirements in that we're creating a digital virtual lockbox, so to speak, where the agency doesn't have access to any of the respondents into that lockbox. We at Bid Express have designed the system to where we do not have access to the lockbox, and the agency and the contractors do not have access to see any of their responses that have been submitted in the lockbox aside from what they've submitted themselves. It uses encryption technology end to end. And the main thing to know here is this meets the requirements for sealed bidding, keeps the parties out that don't need to see, and ensures the agency doesn't have access as well as Bid Express doesn't have access until after the deadline. So with that said, this is what it's like to respond. I'm not going to make you watch me fill out an entire bid. That would take a while because I'm slow to type and don't have my mouse here. But the first thing to notice is you have a bid status of incomplete, submission status not submitted. You have a number of quick links. So if I am responsible for the portion of the bid that's entering pricing, I can begin putting in my pricing information. You'll notice my extension calculations are being done for me as we talked about. This information can be imported from an external source, Heavy Bid, your estimating software. It can be exported out so you can work on it in other software. However, that contractor is comfortable with doing it. Entering this information is the final goal here, where it produces a section total, grand total, and any of the individual requirements built into the solicitation will give you a red asterisk. So you'll notice some information is already pre-filled. As part of the template, and this is same applies to local only funded or local only projects, you can enable a feature called auto populate, where contractors would normally fill out multiple of the same fields that ask them for their company name, fax, email, phone number, address. This is the type of information that will already be pre-filled to save them on that time. And again, provide more ways for them to ensure they're not missing information. This can be overridden, but this pulls from their registration so they're not having to worry about retyping it in over and over again. So that's just one example. Bid bond information. The way ODOT has set this up and the way it's commonly done across Ohio is either allowing the bid bond to be electronically uploaded, scanned in, and provided before the bid opening, or a cashier's check can be mailed in, or bid bond can be mailed in, a copy of the check can be uploaded into this section. And then at the bid opening, some agencies will require an original from the low. Some agencies will require an original from all of the respondents within 24 hours, 48 hours, or some agencies will say, hey, you know what? We want all the originals in before time. We do have an electronic bid bond verification component that would be available. It's not on here, but should the agency use the electronic bid bond verification component, we are partnered with Surety 2000, Surety Wave, InsureVision. There are two leading bid bond clearinghouses, electronic bid bond networks that will work with the bond agent, work with the contractor, provide an electronic version of the bid bond. And because we're integrated with those services, the system will check that the right contractors on that bid bond, the right amount, the power of attorney is in place, the right percentage, and everything that would be considered a valid, verified bid bond would be pre-checked before they submit the bid. So those options are in there and available, and we would work with our individual agencies to determine which route they want to take at the local level. But this is how this is operated at the state and federal level and FEMA level, embedded into the templates. All right, so continuing on with the contractor side, we talked about them filling out the responses. The option for them to check the bid to make sure they didn't miss anything is available with this check bid option. The browser is going to start yelling at you. It's going to say, hey, this bid's incomplete. It'll take you down to the first area where you've missed information. You'll see it in red. Until you fill that information out, excuse me, that won't go away. So those are the procedures in place to ensure minimizing bids, proposals with mistakes. Not only that, if you try to submit this bid, it's going to give you another another alert that'll tell you, hey, guess what? You didn't finish it. And it'll pop you down to the next area where you've missed information, and that red bar won't go away, or the red aspect of those fields won't go away until you take action on them. That is the contractor side. We mentioned about price cuts up to the last second. This will allow that bidder to make those last minute changes by going in. If they need to change a price here to a lower amount, they can hit resubmit as many times as they need to up to the last second, and the agency will only receive the latest response. They're not going to see a long string of changes on the bid. They're just going to see the latest response that was submitted. So that's on the contractor side. I am going to switch gears again and move over to the agency perspective. We'll fast forward, jump in our time machine, and we'll act as the agency opening up these responses in a official bid opening meeting room, in their own home office, and out and about wherever they would like to open these responses and read aloud those electronic submissions. So I'm going to log in as an agency. The only thing the agency would need in that bid opening room, or wherever they at, obviously, is access to the internet and a device that can access to the internet, so that they can download the responses from the encrypted lockbox and begin announcing them out loud, or whatever the requirement is. And Tom and Russ will be speaking to that here in a moment in terms of the legality of electronic bidding as it relates to bid openings and what's required and what's not required. So I'm logged in as the agency side. We'll go back to our solicitations tab, which is where most of the activity will happen on the platform. Navigate to a closed solicitation. So you can see the status on this solicitation is closed. I'd click the name of the solicitation. It's going to give me a summary of the solicitation. So again, I know that I'm opening bids to the right one. We have this fetch bids button. It's a legacy term that we've had in the system. It's kind of a silly name to call it fetch bids, but it's there. We've had it since the inception, and we just have kept it in since then. This will take us into the official bid opening screen. Now, many agencies have chosen to project a screen in the bid opening room. So in case contractors want to come in and view them being the agency, you as the agency, open bids, they can see it live on the screen. Or we've seen other agencies open up a Zoom, a webinar meeting to where contractors can log in to view the agency's screen, just like I'm doing right now, and opening bids. Some agencies will use a live streaming service. We've seen agencies use Facebook, YouTube Live, of course, any of the free services or the paid services with Zoom and GoToMeeting and Teams. The point is, however the agency wishes to display this information to contractors, which you don't have to display it on a screen. Some agencies just choose to open them at the convenience of their office or in their home office. And then when they're ready to push out results, the contractors will have an email notice letting them know when results are available so that they can review them on their own. So that option is available as well. So it really depends on whether you want to mimic your current process of continuing to open your bids in a conference room, putting it on a screen, reading them out loud. But the point is you're navigating the Bid Express. At the bottom of the screen, you have all the bids that were submitted. You can either open them one by one or open them all at once. When you do open them, it will decrypt the responses, display them on your screen. You'll get this green check mark, which will indicate that the bid is indeed complete. They being the contractor has filled out the forms, the addenda acknowledgement, signed with electronic signatures, added their pricing in. You have your bid totals that you can read aloud, and each link within the system where you might see blue, that implies a hyperlink that you can drill into even further. So if I want to look at this Shana vendor company, it will take me to the page of the individual contractor that submitted this bid. It'll again give me the quick links to certain sections. So if I need to just look at the addendum, like I need to look at the bid bond section, or I need to look at just the pricing, so I can quickly check off to say that they've complied with all the necessary requirements, I can use these quick links. Or I can just go down one by one, look at what their response was in each of the fields. Here's all their pricing. Here's all the required forms that were filled out, uploaded documents that were provided, so on and so forth. That's one way to go about doing this, is looking at the individual responses. If you, as the agency, want to immediately look at the bid tabulations and begin analyzing those results, we have at the top of the page, so I was showing you the bottom, which reveals the electronic responses. At the top of the page, you have an actions bar with a drop-down menu. Available reports will become apparent here. You can post the apparent, which is bids as read, just shows you the totals. I'll show that as an example. An email notice will go out to all of the plan holders list, letting them know that bids as read are available. Here's the respondents, here's the bid total, a status. You as an agency will be able to provide any comments. Let's say you manually overrided any individual agency, any individual contractor as non-responsive, maybe on the department list, or for whatever reason you want to override them as non-responsive. You can provide a comment next to their name as to why they were considered non-responsive. Outside of that, you have access to bid tabulations. I'm going to look at this bid tab bidders example, which will show you a list of all of the bid schedule and the sections that were a part of it, either in electronic view, or more commonly, we see agencies go straight to the export bid tabulations in Microsoft Excel, which will provide that Excel sheet breakdown of all the sections, if they're sections, it doesn't have to be broken down into sections, and the individual items. So we see here roadway, here's the contractors, here's the unit price and extension, here's the items going down the screen. Now we have multiple formats of this. If the agency is used to seeing this format in terms of a horizontal representation where it's going across the screen instead of down the screen, we have those formats as well. But what we're doing here is pulling in all of the respondents' unit pricing into an Excel bid tabulation report that can begin to be immediately reviewed. So you'll see at the bottom here, erosion control, drainage, pavement, traffic control, all of the items are organized based on those sections. Again, if you don't have a section, it's just one giant item list or a couple of items, it'll be on one tab. That is available to be posted public. So if I post to vendors, an email notice will go out. Vendors will have access to what that you just saw. They can download an Excel sheet, or they can view it directly on their browser and begin to go one by one what the pricing was. That's if the agency makes it available. The agency can choose to not reveal the bid tabulation and just show the apparent bid results. So this is the bid opening side. You have we're not going to make any final determination on who's awarded, if it's awarded at low bid, if it's awarded as best value, or if it's qualification based. That's on the agency to determine. Bid Express is not just used for low bid unit price only. We see facility bids that are base bid, lump sum, time and materials, general goods and services, requests for proposals, requests for qualifications when you're doing your consultant procurement, your alternate delivery type of RFQs, letters of interest, all types of solicitations. It's all based on the premise that you build templates to accommodate those requirements and provide a means for those contractors, consultants, and vendors to comply with those requirements in a digital format into a sealed lockbox. All right, that was a long-winded way to answer the questions on what's involved with making your vendors aware, what's involved with drafting and those 4 steps in advertising the solicitation, how are contractors viewing this and accessing bid information, downloading plans, responding to the bid, how do bid openings operate. I'm going to change my screens here and allow Russ and Tom to take it away on the legal perspective. We've gone over ODOT's perspective, LPA perspective, and now we're jumping into the legal's perspective. So let me do some screen sharing gymnastics here and ensure this information is viewable to everyone here and online. No, I actually went out of order, so my apologies. We're gonna have Tina jump in again on ODOT best practices. I'm jumping the gun here. All right, let me make sure we're sharing the screen.
To run about 15 minutes ahead of time. I don't think you were sharing the Excel sheet. Sorry, I missed that. But
Okay.
you can share, save that for then.
Okay.
If you want to let
Yeah.
know.
Are we seeing the screen there? And all right, back in business.
Okay, I'm just gonna quickly go through my advice on how you get started. So part of the challenge for me when we were doing this years ago was translating what we were currently requiring at bid time to how we were going to do that on bidding online. So the way I approached it at the time was I basically printed out pretty much every single document that we had that we were requiring at bid time and used a proposal as kind of like a notebook. And I just literally started crossing out, like with a red pen, things that we either didn't need, that we had glommed onto bidding, or that we needed, but we didn't necessarily need from every bidder. So I took the approach, let's see what we can focus out of the bidding process into award or into contract execution. And by doing that, we were able to come up with a very straightforward, streamlined bidding process that didn't really require a lot of extra information at bid time. So instead of creating this like super bid of sorts that had every single thing incorporated into it and was 30 or 40 pages, I'll show you a screenshot, but we have just the items that you're going to bid and a couple of random questions, along with, if it's a federal job and there's a goal, the DBE utilization piece. So that's how I would approach it if I were starting this again. And then this is just a screenshot of how we have our bids laid out. So on the left, you can see those are just the categories we have. We have the items, the DBE list, and then the bidding acknowledgements section. And then on the right is just our bidding acknowledgements. And that's really with the bid, that's really all we get. I mean, obviously we have a bid bond or a certified check, but it's been stripped down to just these items. I am now going to turn it over to Tom Pannett.
All right, my turn. Good morning, everyone. This is Tom Pannett. I assume, can they see my face? Okay, or you can see my face, but can you see my moving face? That's all right. I know what I look like, sadly enough. So anyway, good morning. Occasionally, while I was at ODOT and a couple of times since I left and I retired in February of this year, I've been asked to give my legal perspective on things. What I'm providing today is not a formal legal opinion, and it's just my take based on my experience, both at ODOT as an engineer, a contracts manager, and as an attorney, and what I've seen from the outside looking in. So that is my little disclaimer. Again, Tom Pannett. I recently retired from ODOT, been there about 31 years, and before I left, I was the manager of contract sales and estimating, so I'm intimately familiar with this process, with the idea and concept of electronic bidding, and used to work with the very fine folks at ODOT for a number of years that you've heard talk here today. Let's go ahead and go see if I can go through the PowerPoint. All right, so what I want to do for you at some level is to give a sense of comfort that what's going on here, not only has it been vetted by folks over the years, but it is definitely a legal thing to do. It's not even remotely outside the bounds of legality. ODOT has a policy that they will hopefully eventually will implement at the behest of the federal government, sort of formalizing what they do for opening bids and reading bids. It's in ODOT's contract, and I'll show you the pieces of that electronic bidding is required, and then just kind of give a little summary on the practicality of it all, and I'm done. So actually, you saw a little bit of this slide from Stephanie. Back in 2006, the director of the Department of Transportation, Gordon Proctor, asked Dennis Decker, who was the division administrator of the Federal Highway Administration, if this was okay to do, if it was okay to implement a formal electronic bidding process. And the feds are very reluctant to do anything that's pushing the boundaries or outside the box. So when we got this response, and I was here at the time, I was one legal counsel at the time, 2006. We got this response from the feds. It gave us all the comfort we need to be able to do electronic bidding. But if you look at the law, if you look at 23 CFR 635.113, it doesn't say you can do electronic bidding, right? It says that all bids received in accordance with the terms of the advertisement shall be publicly opened and announced. So what the interpretation of that was, bids are going to be received because the terms and conditions, in accordance with the terms, because the terms and conditions of the bid put out to bid say, do this electronically, all right? And then they're going to be publicly opened, and ODOT publicly opens these in two ways. And I'll give you a slide on this in a minute. They publish the bid tab for everyone to see, so you can see the details of the bid, the details of the project, and details of the bidders and the apparent low bidder. So folks can see that publicly, right? And then the bid is read by a group of folks, of experienced folks here at ODOT. It's not necessarily a public reading, but it is in a conference room, and they're actually read out loud. And the feds, the federal government representative, is permitted there, and they often are, to oversee to make sure that this is being done compliant with the federal law. So in that way, based on the federal interpretation, the way ODOT's practice has been done for well over 15 years, as you've heard, they're compliant with the federal revised code or federal code. This is a bid tab, right? Many of you have probably already seen it. You can see that the project that was bid is provided there, the project information, project number, what the state's estimate is, the location, type of project, the funding split usually is on there, the dates of the letting, the date of the project supposed to be completed, and you can see the bidders as they come across, and you can right off the bat immediately see the parent low. So publicly, this is available, and this meets the federal requirements. And again, ODOT reads the apparent low bidder. Again, this is also consistent and compliant with state law. So ODOT's construction code section is chapter 5525 of the revised code. ODOT's general code section is 5501 of the revised code. And you'll see in there, believe it or not, that it still says that the projects, the director, the bids are read or to be read. And the director also can enter into contracts for competitive bid letting with local governments. So again, my attempt here to give you some comfort is that not only is ODOT consistent with the practice of reading bids, but also in 5501.03, they have the legal authority to do business with you or do the bidding for you through this process. Also, it's important to know that the DAS has the same process, or at least the same permission. A number of years ago, I don't know how long ago it was now, maybe 5 or 7, DAS came to us and asked to help with this Bid Express, BidX process. And so Tina, you've heard talk before, and myself went over there, and folks, I think from Infotech were there at the time, perhaps, met with DAS and explained to them how, great it was to do this thing electronically. And so they've been doing it. They took baby steps in the beginning, but now I'm pretty sure the Facilities Construction Commission does almost all their bids electronically. They actually changed the law, so they have a specific code section in there that says they can file a bid electronically. ODOT has never done it, never modified their code section. They probably should, wouldn't hurt, but they don't need to, again, because they've been compliant. And they're compliant not only because of what ODOT law says, but also what other sections of revised codes say. Chapter 1301 is the Uniform Electronic Transactions Act. And if anybody takes a read of it, you'll see that for a very long time, it's been permissive in Ohio to make electronic contracts, transactions done with the state or with private individuals electronically, and it's again fully compliant with state code. Now, I think you heard Stephanie talk a little bit about the county and municipal codes. Well, I'm not going to get into too many details of that because largely, due to home rule, the municipalities can have different code sections. So I haven't ever scrutinized all of them, but this is a few code sections, and chapter 304 of the revised code gives you the county government folks the ability to do things electronically. There's also some nuance in there in section 307.842 about a automatic data processing board. I think that is for, again, read reasonably, it allows you to do electronic bidding, but I'm pretty sure it's set up for other processes like taxes and real estate and things like that can be done electronically, and given the legal permission from the General Assembly for counties to do that. For municipalities, again, they have home rule. Section 723.52, however, talks about the construction projects and competitive bidding, and it's not too dissimilar to the federal code when you consider that the local governments are allowed to invite and receive competitive bids. So in essence, as long as you're consistent with the process, as long as you tell people you're going to be doing your bid electronically, that you're going to be receiving, you're going to be putting out the bids for an invitation electronically, they're going to be receiving them electronically, you're going to be in compliance with this revised code section for municipalities. Before I left ODOT, I was asked to draft a policy that would document for the benefit of the federal government process that ODOT uses for bid opening and bid readings. And so this is a little excerpt from that policy. It's not been adopted by ODOT yet. I don't know how much they would change if they needed to, because this is the process that's been used, to my knowledge, for a very, very long time. There's a group of folks, and they're very experienced folks at ODOT. The Deputy Director of Construction Management is the sort of the head of the awards committee, they call it. And that person reads the bid tab, as I showed you earlier, the specific information, reads them out loud, and a recommendation is made to the committee. Do they accept or reject the award? Occasionally, bids are rejected. Sometimes there's a bid anomaly, there is unbalancing, and there's a lack of meeting of a goal or not including a proper paperwork. But 90-some% of the time, the bids are accepted and then recommended for the director to be accepted and then signed off on and awarded. But also in ODOT's contract, the bids are required to be electronic, right? So section 102.09 talks about the proposal guarantee being submitted electronically. But section 102.10, delivery of the bids, under the first sentence, all bids must be submitted using electronic bid submission software. So contractually, contractors who want to bid are mandated to bid this way. And when you do it on your side, if you don't have ODOT do the bids for you, you want to have this type of language in your contract. So again, letting the bidders know right off the bat, letting even folks know on the outside, including the federal government, that people who are going to be participating in this procurement are going to be required, and they know they're going to be required to bid electronically. Like I said before, sometimes I'm asked to give my sort of informal opinion about things, and I was asked to draft an article on e-stamping and e-signing of contracts, and I provided this link to that. It's 4+ pages, and I took a deeper dive into the revised code and some practical applications of blockchain technology for electronic bidding. And again, if you want to look at that, you can see some additional information that doing things this way electronically is legal. It's easy. You've heard folks talk about that, and it's immutable, meaning it's not going to be changed. Once bids are put in, they're solid. The system is encrypted, it's protected. I believe they have servers in Atlanta that handle all these things. So it's a very solid system. It's a very reliable system. I do remember one time that we had a bid challenge, and Tina and I met with a bidder claiming to the high heavens that they bid low and could show us through their emails and computers that they were the low bidder, and that the bid express system didn't take their bid properly. And so the guy drove down from Canton or somewhere and sat with us, and we did a little forensic analysis on his laptop and found out, sure enough, he submitted a bid, but it was the bid he submitted at 10 o'clock that day. He had his bid ready to go at 10:59, but didn't push the go button. So we were able to prove to him, and they walked away sheepishly because they were very adamant about they were right and we were wrong, that the bid didn't get processed. The one, at least the one that he thought he submitted, he didn't submit. So gave us, a lot of comfort that the system, even when challenged, and it was just an informal challenge, but still they're fired up about it, because it would have been a little better had the guy pushed the right button. The bids, like I said, are immutable. So the last part of the slide, I just want to talk about, what they said. I mean, you've heard the Infotech folks, you've heard Tina talk, you've heard Jeff talk about what a great process it is, and I just have to echo it. This was my process for a number of years at ODOT. It was, comforting to know that the team knew what they were doing, the Infotech folks knew what they were doing, and the system was very, very robust. So I have to echo everything they said. And then the point when you want to, I would try to encourage folks just to let ODOT do the bidding for you. I know that different counties have their priorities, different local governments want to do things their way. But in this system, to the extent that you can, if you're comfortable doing it, ODOT's been doing this for so many years, billions and billions of dollars, thousands and thousands of contracts done electronically, that if you put yourself in their hands, you can feel comfortable doing it. Last thing, I want to make myself available to anyone. If you want to call, you can ask questions here, but sometimes there's other people that you want to talk to afterwards. I've spoken to county prosecutors, city attorneys, outside counsel. If they want to call me and ask me to walk through any of this stuff, I'm happy to do it. So again, Tom Panet signing off. Back to you guys.
All right, so I know everybody's drinking from a fire hose, and we've been talking at you for an hour and a half about now, and we wanted to make a transition here towards accepting some questions, talking about next steps. What can an agency do to get involved? And before we jump into questions and answers, which I know there's some people that have been chatting with our team member Gavin here and raise their hand to ask questions. We'll turn on your mics so you can talk to us. We can hear your voice and we can be humans together. Or you can ask questions in the chat, but I wanted to talk about some next steps here and make some suggestions. So you've heard from all the perspectives. We've gone through answering some common questions. on the legal side, on just the nitty gritty, what's on the operational side, expectations from ODOT side. Now the question is, all right, what do we need to do next? If you as an agency want to start involving yourselves with a process enabling contractors to submit bids and your team receiving bids, what do you need to do? And two recommendations. One, we have a team that would be ready to talk to you in your individual context. So if after the question and answer, you wanted to stay on, or if you wanted to put in the chat that you would like some personalized help or discussion on, you have your own process, your forms, your requirements, how does that work in your context? We'd be happy to not only stay on the line and answer any questions, but if you put your name down in the chat, we will hook you up with some staff, some educational team members that will take a look at even your local projects or your consultant procurement RFPs and mock it up in the context of Bid Express on how that would operate, so you can consider it more from your own perspective. So that's offer one. Please put your name down and make that request if you would like some personalized one-on-one time to work with those individuals. The other is to talk about, let's say you are ready to move forward with online bidding and you want to implement and adopt this process for an upcoming project, or just want to get into make a preparation. Maybe you haven't identified a project coming up, but you still want to get the ball rolling. In terms of Infotech, we have a license form that each of our new agencies we would email. That license form includes just the language to say, hey, you have this new power for good and you're not going to use it for evil. And once we get that license form signed and emailed back, we would hook you up with an onboarding team member. We would work on scheduling. So implementation with Bid Express, because we already have those solicitation templates created for state, federal, FEMA. A lot of the legwork is done, so it's not a huge undertaking in terms of months and months and months and getting started, especially if you have a project coming up that is ODOT funded, excuse me, or is a federal project, and we have those templates ready to go. Then it's just a matter of working with you to create the account, getting those users who want to have access to the system, access to the website, and walking you through some of the typical steps involved when operating that solicitation in an online format. Now, if you have a project coming up that is local only, it's your own, we would work with you to create your own templates for those types of projects. It would be a couple of days longer. Typically for that type of onboarding, we would ask for 6 hours of your time. That 6 hours could be broken up into multiple sessions, maybe an hour session, 2-hour session, where we would work with you on training how to use the website based on your requirements and procedures, run through some mock bids, and work with you to create that custom template for your local projects and however many types, IFBs, RFBs, ITBs, requests for quotes, requests for qualifications, requests for proposals. Create that template, get your sign off to say, hey, this is good to go. And we would be on the phone with you to advertise. We'd be on the phone with you during bid opening, so you wouldn't feel like you're jumping into the deep end and trying to figure out all this on your own. Really, most of the learning happens as you're doing it on a real project. It's great to have that background training, but when we're with you on the phone, walking you through each step of the way on a live project, that's where the real cementing of how this process works. So it's a license form. We'd hook you up to our onboarding team. We would start scheduling those 6 hours. If it's the local project, if it's a state, federal, or FEMA project, it would be way less involved because there's no need to collaborate on creating that template. Now, those are the next steps for procedures. If you want to raise your hand in the chat to ask a question, we'll turn on your mic. Or if you want to leave a question in the chat, we'll answer those questions that come about. If it's a question for me, anybody at ODOT, for Tom and Russ, we'd be happy to answer those questions. So let's go ahead. We're early here, so we're gonna have all the time in the world to answer any of those pressing questions, small or big. We'll start off with what we see here. Any hands raised? And I owe you showing on my screen a bid tabulation. Excuse me. Tina's coming over to,
We did get a couple questions in the chat. You don't have to get up.
You want me to read?
The first one was, how was Bid Express selected to supply the service? So I think that one's a little bit like I have multiple answers to that, but basically from the ODOT perspective, DOTs are largely, a lot of DOTs are largely invested in something called AstroWare. And so we use something slightly different on the DOT side. We use BidX. But I don't know, maybe 10 years ago or so, we started doing our non-highway projects and some of our procurement contracts in bidexpress.com. Actually, it's been longer than 10 years ago. So I guess, as far as selected, I don't know if it was selected as much as just, met our need at the time. If you fast forward a little bit, a couple of years, back in 2012, as Tom mentioned, DAS and the Safe Facilities Commission was looking for a solution to do their bidding. And they actually did put it out for bid in, I think it was 2012. And then it's been renewed at least once or twice since then. I think the latest was in 2018. I'm not exact on those dates, but it was put out for bid and was selected as a standard viable option for the state. The last question, what was the cost of, I think, doing business before online bidding? And then does the cost seem to deter smaller companies from participating in it? So when we were doing this many years ago, we did get a little bit of pushback from, some of the smaller contractors. But I think that has definitely waned over time. I mean, I've sat on the phone with grandsons and granddaughters and the neighbor's kid to get people up to speed to bid. So while I think it might have been a challenge and could have potentially been a deterrent 15 years ago, I see no signs of that today. And we bid, ginormous contracts, and we bid, itty bitty tiny contracts like the non-highway projects. So no, I don't see it as a deterrent at this point.
Hey, Tina, can I jump in? Just a reminder to remind your contractors that are bidding, if they've never used the system, do not wait till the last day to set up your account. We have run into that a couple of times because there is a process to get your digital ID and everything. So they need to make sure they are doing that more than in advance of 24 hours before the bid. So that's probably the one big thing we've run into. Once they've done it once, you're set up, you're done. It doesn't matter what you're bidding on, but make sure that your vendors understand that they need to set that up ahead of time, because there is a process for that.
And back to the cost thing something I forgot to mention, which is kind of funny because I've told the story 1,000 times. But one thing with the contractors and the cost. So when a contractor is overnighting their paper to you, it's costing them at least 25, and that might be like a 15-year-old dated number. Like it might be closer to $35 or $40 now. So when you compare that to the per bid cost, it's really kind of a wash. So early on, we did this big roadshow when we were going to online bidding initially. And, these were pretty big groups with the Contractors Association. And we were at Cuyahoga Falls, and one of the contractors kind of pinned me down a little bit and said, well, what if my internet connection goes down? And I said, well, what if your car breaks down when you're driving your bid to us? You get a flat tire, you do something like that. I think that the thing you have to think about when you're trying to go down this, path of online bidding is, while there is a fee associated with producing the bid, there was always a fee associated, not a fee, but a cost that we're paying, you know, like as an agency, like in overhead back to the contractors to manually, you know, take the bids, type the bids, verify the bids. I mean, all of that stuff came at a cost. And I did a long time ago do a cost benefit analysis, but it's been like many, many, many years ago. So just keep in mind that there's always, almost always, you know, an exchange for something that you think might be a risk. There's always a counter benefit that I've ran into in my experience. So.
And I would echo the same thing as Tina from a county perspective. That we hear from the contractors, they love this because they don't have to pay for a bid packet up in advance, whether or not they're choosing to bid or not. So they don't have that cost. And it was not unusual that a bid packet, we may be charging 25 to 100 or more, depending on the cost of putting together the hard copy bid packet. They also don't have to pay either a project manager or a intern or co-op or anything to drive to the agency to drop off the bid. And come back and worry about whether they get there in time with a crash or anything like that. So rarely do we even see bidders come to bids anymore because they like it. They can just sit at home or sit in the office or sit in their vehicle and sit there and play with their bids, and they don't have to worry about having those unknowns. And again, they don't have to pay for all that upfront cost either. So.
And I'll just add to that. Thanks, Stephanie and Tina. So going back to the cost question, another interesting consideration is with access to Bid Express, the contractor is only charged for either a per bid event fee of $35, or they can subscribe as a monthly subscriber of $50 per month. And if they're a monthly subscriber, they can bid unlimited with any agency in Ohio and any agency across the nation, which means we already have hundreds of subscribers, of contractor subscribers in Ohio. So if any of you agencies were to come on board, offer electronic bidding, those subscribers, it wouldn't cost them anything to submit a bid for any new agencies that were to come on board.
That's
So
a savings. That's a savings for the subs too. Your subs and material suppliers, they can now download these bid packets at no cost at all. When in the past, if they wanted to get a copy of the plans, even though they weren't the bidder, they were just supplying to all of the companies, they had to pay before. This, they could go and download the plans, and even decide whether or not they want to reach out to the contractors or be part of this at zero cost, because the only person that is paying is the one that actually submits the bid.
Exactly. And to add a bit to the question about selection, there is a piggyback clause, a co-op purchasing clause in OFCC's contract with Infotech that allows states and any Ohio entity like cities and counties to piggyback. So that's something that's available. In addition, there are many agencies that have purchasing thresholds so that if there's if a certain item or service, goods and service is over a certain amount, that would require a quote or a competitive bid. But if it's under, many have the purchasing authority to make the selection on their own. And for most of the occasions across the nation, because bidexpress.com is free to the agency, there have not been the need to issue a competitive procurement. And that's just an aside from the various other options that we talked about. In addition to the question, Stephanie rightfully brought up the digital ID process, and you might be wondering what in the world is that? I've never heard of digital ID. And I wanted to break that down real quick. With Bid Express, there are two signing options. And the first signing option is the ability to sign bids electronically without any sort of identity verification, or there's the option for the agency to implement where contractors are signing with what's called a digital signature with additional identity verification. And it's basically the difference between a wedding signature versus a notarized signature. Now, the agency has the option to go either route. You can choose an electronic signature process, which does not entail or require the extra step of contractors to verify their identity with Infotech, which is a procedure of creating a account and being set up to bid electronically. So if the agency does not want to add that second level of security and identity verification, the agency does not have to opt into that. And they can simply implement an electronic signature process, which does not require any vetting or verification of identity on Infotech's side. Now, if the agency does wish to implement digital signatures, which has a little different and higher level of security involved, as well as identity verification, Infotech provides that free service of verifying the identity of the user. So we can say that this person is who they say they are. And when they submit their bid, if they're ever contesting or protesting about, hey, I never submitted this, or I didn't submit these prices, we can actually verify within the system that they did indeed, as that user, submit those prices. They were not altered and there was no sabotage involved. So there's that level of identity verification. If the agency wants to implement a digital signing process through the use of Infotech digital IDs and digital certificates, there is the extra step of the contractor signing up for a digital ID, which would require the user to call in to our support, provide some form of government ID so we can verify their identity. We would provide that digital ID, and they would need to have that digital ID in advance of that solicitation of them responding. So we can absolutely go into more detail when we work with each individual agency who wants to take the next steps and implement a online bidding process. We'll run through the pros and cons and make our suggestions, but ultimately it'd be on the agency to choose. There were some questions about accessing electronic documents.
Yeah, there was a question about the electronic documents that become available, like the bid tab report that you're showing here. If you wouldn't mind, maybe just showing that as well. It was answered in the Q&A, but might be helpful for everyone to see those documents, as well as questions around the retention policy that Infotech has in these documents.
So which documents are they?
Just the actions.
Okay. So there's, whenever bids are opened, the system will provide a list of available exportable reports, either in Excel, PDF, XML. We have an API which can be connected to internal web-based systems like an ERP system, a financial system to push the award information. But this section here shows all the available reports that can be exported out of the system. If you aren't looking at just pricing, this export open bids MS Excel will compare side by side the non-pricing factors. That's maybe some of the, if it's an RFP, you have qualification-based questions, you have implementation, you have financial questions, the non-pricing factors that might need to be evaluated for a best value respondent evaluation. Retention policy and exportable, all this information is exportable to be stored in your own servers. It remains on the BidExpress website. It really indefinitely, but our retention policy is 10 years. Is that right? 10 years. We say in our terms that we'll keep this data on BidExpress for 10 years, but in reality, we've kept it on here. So for the duration of an agency's use of the system, the bid information, the bid award information will remain here, and it's all exportable each time. Or there can be an API feed where it automatically sends results to your own website if you choose to make the award information or the bid tab results on your own website or stored in your own servers.
You got time?
So any other thoughts or questions, curveballs you want to throw at me? Or anybody else that's here on site? Questions for Tom, Tina, Jeff, the Infotech crew? And feel free to raise your hand if you'd like to speak to us, we can turn on your microphone and we can all hear your lovely voices. So I just want to reiterate, if there's nothing else trickling in here, please put down in the comments or feel free to email us. But if you would like to put down in the comments, if you would like to be contacted, if you would like to take the next steps with getting hooked up with our onboarding, or if you're not there yet and you just want some personalized attention when it comes to understanding how this works more in your own context, we would be happy to work with you after this. With that said, I think.
I'll throw our contact information. You want each of the contact us on up there.
Yes.
That's fine.
Stephanie was kind enough to put her contact information in there. As a follow-up, we're going to send the recording, a copy of the slides, some questions that were asked and answers to those questions. And the licensing form, if you'd like to take the next steps with onboarding. And I apologize, I don't have Infotech contact information, but Gavin is going to provide that in the chat. Yeah, so we'll put our Infotech contact information in there. But we're going to be writing down those of you who would like to connect after this. We had plans more for those who are on site to have a workshop time where we can sit down with you individually and talk through some of your requirements and different types of solicitations that can be built into templates. If you'd like to have that available, we're going to be here. I can have some staff back in Gainesville, have a call with any one of you if it's just a quick discovery session where we talk about your requirements, or if we go into your own context and work through some of your requirements of the solicitation packages, then we can do that as well.
Yeah, just the infotech.com contact page is okay. Do you want us to email?
Yeah, Infotech contact. And then you can put our emails in there as well. And
That's for my contact if you want.
yes, and we're gonna put Tom's contact information in there, and we'll have that contact information sent out. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We got done 5 minutes early, and everybody,
Keep it up.
what's that? Yeah, we'll keep this session up. So if you wanted to ask more questions and remain on here, we're going to be in here and having our lunch and enjoying some time. Otherwise, if you wanted to just chit chat, and we can turn on your mics and you can join us, feel free to raise your hand. But again, thank you to everyone who participated. Hopefully you came away with information that makes more sense to you now, and you feel a little more comfortable about venturing into offering electronic bidding to your contractor, vendor, consultant community. So again, we'll leave this open and feel free to jump off.